Hello, everyone. Welcome to the webinar, Employee Engagement that Transcends Generations. My name is Mattice Zundel, and I am proud to report I'm a Gen X, so I've got my kind of 80s slide theme happening here. If you don't know me or not familiar with me or haven't been on some of my previous webinars, again, my name is Mattice Zundel. Wanted to introduce myself and tell you a little bit about my background and my story. Over a decade ago, I was the director of human resources for a nonprofit organization and found myself working with a bully. I don't know if you've worked with a bully before or not, but it's not a very fun experience. I personally felt bullied by this person, and then I also was dealing with the organizational problems that he created as the director of human resources. And so it was a very frustrating, exhausting sort of time for me. Obviously, we had a negative work environment there due to the bullying. And during that time, I started getting my master's degree and was very fascinated by my situation at work. And so I started studying the topic of workplace bullying in graduate school, and I wrote all of my papers and research and my thesis on this topic of bullying. And so I kind of joke that I have a master's degree in workplace bullying. Well, I got out of grad school and decided that I was going to save the world from bullies. I started a company called No Workplace Bullies as a consulting firm. But over time, I really went through a paradigm shift and realized that my goals were not about resolving workplace bullying. My goals were really about creating a positive work environment. So fast forward all these years later, while I am an expert in workplace bullying, I'm ultimately an expert in creating a positive work environment, hence my expertise on employee engagement, positive work environments, and that sort of thing. So Civility Partners is my HR consulting firm, but we do strategic HR work. So we work with clients to help them create positive work environments. We get called in when companies, for example, do engagement surveys and realize they have low engagement and they're looking for help on increasing employee engagement. We get called in to coach abrasive executive leaders, and we get called in to do a lot of training programs on topics like respect and diversity and performance management for managers, and of course resolving bullying and also sexual harassment training we do as well. So that's a little bit about me. I also have had the pleasure over the last decade to publish articles in a huge variety of places, some pretty cool major news venues such as NPR. I was a regular contributor to Forbes.com, though did not have the time to continue on doing that, so stopped doing that. I've also served a huge array of clients, and I wanted you to know that, not to show off, but because I wanted you to know that I have really seen it all. I've worked with tiny little banks in the middle of nowhere. I've worked with Fortune 500 companies, the military, hospitals, universities, nonprofits, you name a type of a business, I've worked with it. And so that really informs my point of view in that what I've found is it doesn't really matter what industry you're in, and I hear that a lot. People say, well, in our industry, it's special because of X, Y, Z, but I got to be honest, humans are humans, and ultimately we all want the same types of things. So I've just noticed there is a real constant in terms of how to build employee engagement. What I do encourage you to do is to close off all of your distractions. Consider this hour an opportunity to really get some strong education around employee engagement and generational differences, and ultimately how to build engagement across generations. So turn off your phone, close your door, lock your door if you have to, remove that instant messaging and email and all that kind of stuff. Get ready, take this opportunity to learn. It's a free hour, so use it wisely. I'll just say too, you're in the right place if you have or plan to have any engagement initiatives. So maybe you're already working on that topic, or you're planning on working on this topic of engagement moving forward. Or you're in the right place if you have several generations in your workforce and you're trying to understand how to please all of them. And you're also in the right place if you're looking for some cost-effective ideas to build engagement. Now, I like to be super interactive, so just want to make sure everybody on board, you're feeling like you're in the right place. All good? Ready to go? Perfect. I've got a yes, I'm ready to learn. I love it with some exclamation points there. I've got an all good. Awesome. I do encourage you to stay until the end. I just wanted you to know that at the end, I will offer you a nice little gift. And so want to make sure that you don't miss out on that. So what we're going to talk about today is really just defining employee engagement. I want to give you a couple different definitions on the topic of engagement, and then we'll talk about generational differences. And this is not focused on millennials necessarily. I know there's already a ton of information out there about engaging millennials specifically. We are going to talk about 3 different groups of age ranges there in your workforce, and then ultimately we'll talk about how to build strategies that transcend all of those generations. As I mentioned, it doesn't matter what industry you're in or what age you are. There are certain things that all humans desire, and I'll talk with you about how to sort of tap into that with your engagement. I also wanted to give a shout out to my account manager, Rebecca Del Secco. Rebecca is the one who really started the conversation here in our office about this topic. Rebecca's on and she just said, whoop, whoop, go Rebecca. She's was just getting out of college, and in her very last class there in college, she was doing a report around generations. And of course, she's a millennial and was a little concerned about the way she was being talked about online, and we've attended some HR programs together, and she was a little hurt by the things she would hear some of the keynote speakers say as they were making fun of millennials. And so we really started digging into this topic of generation. So kudos to her for bringing this up. All right, so let's go ahead and jump right in. Let's define employee engagement. Now, Gallup is the big engagement group. I'm sure you have heard of Gallup and their engagement survey. Their survey is called the Q12. They really pride themselves in the fact that they've turned an engagement survey that can often be very long into only 12 questions. They've really kind of hit that engagement space hard. The way that Gallup defines engagement is that an employee would be involved in, enthusiastic about, and committed to the work in the workplace. Now, this is a nice definition: involved, enthusiastic, and committed. The thing is that it actually is hard to measure. So interestingly enough, although Gallup has this, what's the word? They're the Q12 people, the engagement survey people, and everybody knows who they are. They don't actually define engagement very well because their questionnaire doesn't necessarily measure these 3 things. You can't really measure enthusiasm. You can ask someone, are you enthusiastic? And they can say yes or no, but it's not really measurable. And so that's part of the problem with Gallup's definition. So I'm not a big fan. Now, I personally like to say that engagement is a profound connection to work tasks, teammates, and the mission. So I'm saying, for example, for myself, I am a business owner. I own Civility Partners, and I, of course, have a profound connection to Civility Partners, the tasks that I engage in every day. I have a profound connection to my teammates because I care about them, and I of course care about their ability to help me get to Civility Partners' mission, which is to create civil work environments. So I myself have a profound connection. So perhaps that informs my own definition of engagement. And so my point of view is that the more profoundly connected employees are to things like their tasks and their teammates and the mission of the organization, the more effort they'll put into things. But my definition isn't necessarily measurable either. How do you have a profound connection, or how do you measure that? So William Kahn, who is considered the father of employee engagement, he put out a definition in 1990 in an academic journal, and he was really the first one to talk about engagement, hence the title father of employee engagement. And so in that research article, what he said is that he thought employees needed to be doing something important that contributes to the organization's success. They have to enjoy their relationships, or they have to have rewarding and supporting relationships. and they have to have the resources needed to accomplish their work. So he's talking about doing something important, having good relationships, and the resources needed. So his is a little bit more measurable because you can measure relationships and how satisfied or dissatisfied people are with relationships. You can certainly ensure that people have what they needed. And you can measure how much somebody feels like they're contributing, and you can engage in activities that sort of push on that. You can encourage managers, for example, to talk about how their employees are contributing to the organization's mission and success. So William Kahn is certainly on the right track with this. Now, interestingly enough, we recently did a client survey, and of course, doing surveys on engagement, among many other topics, is part of what we do when we work with clients. And so we asked several questions about employee engagement in this client survey. And through factor analysis, which is a quantitative methods, statistical sort of process that you run your statistical data through a software system, and it gives you all this interesting information. Through the process of factor analysis, we discovered that William Kahn was pretty right on. So we discovered that people in this organization were really engaged if they believed that the tasks that they were assigned could be completed, and that would include resources and the ability, to have the time to do it, that they fit in the organization and that the work was meaningful. So our factor analysis really matched up very well with William Kahn's definition. The last definition I want to offer up is by a friend of mine, Jeff Toyster. Now, Jeff is the customer service guru. He's written several books on that topic and is really very well acknowledged as a leader in the customer service space. And he has a lot of interesting points of view. He's really focused on building cultures of customer service. So the way he defines engagement is the extent to which an employee is deliberately contributing to the organization's success. Now, his definition is interesting to me because what he's done is removed all the fluff. So if we go back, these definitions, for example, William, he's saying employees need to be doing something important, be feeling like they have good relationships and that they have resources. So William Kahn's definition is sort of one step up. What Jeff's done is take it down to the basics. The whole point of employee engagement is discretionary effort, right? The idea is that if employees are engaged, they will give maximum discretionary effort. That's the whole point. So taking me for example, as I mentioned, I'm profoundly connected to civility partners and the work that I do, and I try to ensure that my employees are also profoundly connected to the work that we're doing and the mission that we're trying to achieve. The idea behind that is that we're all going to give maximum effort all the time. However, we're all humans. I'm human. I own my business, and I personally am not engaged in maximum discretionary effort 100% of the time because I can't. I have a family at home. I have other things that I think about when I'm at work. I get tired around 3 o'clock, so I'm not giving maximum effort then. But the whole point of engagement is that the more engaged people are, the more effort they will give, and ultimately the more money they will make your company, the better customer service, the more productivity they will offer. So what I'm recommending here is that action item number one be that you really consider what employee engagement means in your organization. So I'm just curious, what definition of all of these really resonated with you? How does your organization define employee engagement? Let's have a little conversation. I'm going to take a sip of water while you think about it. Okay, someone says, for me, engagement means going above and beyond at all times because you believe in your organization, its mission, and your fellow employees. Okay, I've got another comment that as a small business, engagement means that each and every employee acts like an owner. That is a great point as well. Any other thoughts? What are the definitions that your organization is using? What else we got? All right, someone else says we haven't really talked about it much, okay? Someone says it's being invested in everything you do, not just at work, okay? Someone else says maximum effort at all times. Okay, so here's where I'm going with this. Again, there's all these definitions of engagement. You know, Jeff is talking about discretionary effort. So if you're developing employee engagement initiatives, the first step is to really consider you know, what do we mean by engagement? Because that's a really loose term that we throw around all the time. Somebody else says that it means a feeling of belonging. That's really what they want. Okay. So, and there's no right or wrong answer. I'm just saying that your organization, before you go start implementing engagement initiatives, you have to decide, are we on Gallup's definition? Are we trying to make people enthusiastic about their work here? Or are we on Jeff's definition? Are we trying to create, you know, maximum effort? Or if you're using my definition or William Kahn's definition, are we trying to ensure people fit, have the resources they need, and are excited? So you really have to decide, what does employee engagement mean before you jump into offering up any sort of engagement initiatives. The last comment I'll make on sort of defining engagement is that you have to understand that engagement really is about a psychological contract that you and your employees make. So on a new hire's first day of work, you're giving them paperwork to fill out. They have to sign something that says they received all of your rules, which is your corporate policy. They have to sign an employment contract that lays out their PTO and holiday pay and all that kind of stuff. So you have them sign all of this paperwork that's really focused on the employer's rules and regulations and ensuring people understand that. However, there is also a psychological contract that's unsaid, right? So the employer is thinking, hey, new hire, you better give me your all. I expect you to be here on time. I expect you to actually do your work while you're here instead of messing around on Facebook. And the employee is thinking, I expect you, oh employer, to give me a healthy and safe work environment where I can do my best. And so there's this contract between the employer and the employee that's unsaid, something to think about as you're building engagement initiatives. Your employees expect for you to create an environment where they can engage so that they can meet your expectations of giving you their best. And as an employer, you're expecting them to give their best. So you have to set them up for success in the ability to give their best. Now, no matter what definition you use, there is a lot of research out there on engagement, and ultimately, in some ways, they are all the same definition. They're really all about, you know, ensuring people are giving all of their effort. And what some research has found, for example, is that companies who have a strong employer brand, which would be related to engagement for sure, they have cost per hire savings. It costs them half as much as an organization who has poor reviews on Glassdoor, for example. Engaged employees are giving maximum discretionary effort much more often than disengaged employees, right? So they're outperforming them by 202%. That's a huge number. Scripps Health has a case study out there online. You're free to research it. They focused on building a culture of trust, also an element of engagement, and they found that there was a lot of increased profitability in doing that. One other research study found that engaged employees offer better customer service, so customer service satisfaction is higher. On the flip side, of course, the negative environment has costs associated with it. So employees who feel bullied, for example, spend 52% of their day talking about it. That's a ton of wasted time. Who are they talking to? Other employees. In terms of performance, if you're at the receiving end of incivility, 48% of us at the receiving end of incivility intentionally decrease our work effort, and 78% of us will say that our commitment to the organization declines. So incivility directly affects employee engagement or disengagement. And there's a lot of money lost to things like workplace bullying. So there is an ROI to these sorts of efforts on engagement. So again, your first step is to define what engagement means. Uh-oh, it sounds like you can't hear me. Can you hear me now? All good? Okay, perfect. I'm sorry that I popped out. Okay, we're back on. So again, I'll just say step number one for you, again, is to define what engagement means in your organization before you start moving in on any sort of engagement initiatives. Okay, let's skip over to talking about generations in the workplace. So part two here. Let's talk about it. This is the fun part. Actually, before we jump in, I'm just curious, what generations do we have on today? Type in your generation. I'm a Gen X. What is everybody else? Curious. We got some more Gen X's. We got some Millennials. We got some baby boomers. Okay, it looks like, at least out of the people who are responding, Gen X's outnumber everybody else. Someone put senior millennial. Like it. Somebody says 1980, so I'm a mixed generation. Okay, and I'm curious, what inspired you to join the webinar today? Just curious to hear. Are you interested in the engagement stuff or the generation stuff or the combination of the two stuff? What inspired you to join the webinar? Okay, everybody's interested in the combination. Someone says, I am responsible for engagement at my organization. Okay, so to the person who says I'm responsible for engagement at my organization, curious how your organization defines engagement. What exactly is it that you're trying to drive employees to? Okay, somebody else says, I love HR issues, all of them. Oh, I love them too. I like that answer. Except for employee handbook stuff. That kind of stuff's a little boring. Let's see here. Lots of people saying I'm interested in the combination and how they relate to each other. Someone says volunteer opportunities is what I'm looking for. I think the stereotypes have gone on a long time, and it's important to learn about the people that make up your organization. That's a great reason to join. Somebody else says, I lead the engagement committee for our admin team and providers who work remotely. All right, curious, same question to you as well. Curious to hear how your organization specifically defines engagement. Exactly what is it that your engagement committee is trying to accomplish? Are you ensuring people have the right resources and feel inspired? Are you trying to get them to be enthusiastic and committed to the organization? Curious to hear what it is you're driving towards. While you all, those two that I put that question out to, while you're answering, I'm gonna move forward and we'll come back to it. Okay, so currently, who's making up the workforce? Well, 25% of the workforce are baby boomers, 33% are Gen X, and 35% are millennials. So we're fairly well even. We're currently, we're not super outnumbering one over the other. All right, how are our divides shaped? How do we come to have these different points of view? Why are our generations behaving so differently? Well, one is new technology created over the course of our lifetimes. Another is pop culture, what's happening, what events are going on in our kind of formative years, and also what world events are going on in our formative years. And really it is about our formative years because how we're parented obviously has a lot to do with how we adult. And so a lot of this is really related to our formative years. So curious to hear from you, what technology was created in your lifetime? What pop culture events were going on in your formative years? Or what world events? So what about these different things shapes your point of view? Just curious. I'll give you a little time to think. What technology, pop culture, or world events shape your point of view? Okay, the internet makes information accessible, so that means the unknown is scary, okay? Television was a technology. From PC to new systems, from large phones to cell phones to the internet. I'm with you. I started working on a little tiny green and black computer screen in, I think, 6th grade is when we got that computer. And then we had the Zach Morris phone, as I joke, from Saved by the Bell, to now computers that we call phones. So much security, especially after 9/11. PC and video games. Instant message was massive for me because I've lived all over the world and it kept me connected. Okay, perfect. And so, these are all great answers. So I would encourage you to think also how these things affect your behavior, because that's really what generational divides are about, right? Is differences in our behavior. So if you went through 9/11, and I still distinctly remember that morning very clearly, um, how does that shape my behavior now? Or the fact that I played Atari when I was a kid, how does that shape me now? The fact that MTV was created in my very young formative years, how does that shape me? So I encourage you to think about that stuff, because that's how you'll come to start empathizing with the other generations, is if you can understand how they came to be that way. So let's talk a little bit about it. So baby boomers, first generation here on our list. Baby boomers are known for being ambitious, loyal, and they're very hard workers. That's kind of the stereotypes that we put on baby boomers. And these are all stereotypes, aren't they? Well, their lives, their formative years were very different than formative years for kids these days, right? So in those days, the average was 4 kids. The focus was very much inside the house. You had mostly stay-at-home moms. That at that time, it was much less accepted to have a working mother. People didn't get divorced the way that they do now. So the focus really was on this nuclear family. That's what was on TV, was the nuclear family. And also baby boomers' parents would have gone through the Depression. And so they really watched their own parents work hard because of the Depression. They saved their money. We just, in those days, you didn't buy things the way that we buy them now. There was no IKEA where you could go and basically buy disposable furniture, which is kind of what furniture is these days if you're buying it at IKEA or Walmart or Target. So the way that they looked at money was very different than the way that we're looking at money now. So seasoned pros, which is a better name than baby boomers, right? Seasoned pros, let's use that word instead, or that phrase instead. They kind of live by this motto of good things come to those who work hard, because of the things that the way that they were parented. I do have to give credit to Brad Karsh. I did not make up these new categories. I saw Brad Karsh speak at the SHRM conference, and he came up with a new way to title these different generations. So instead of baby boomers, he was calling them seasoned pros, and I really loved it. So I'm borrowing it from him, but wanted to give him credit for that. Okay, baby boomers, any thoughts on this? Am I right on here? All right, looks like it. I've got some yeses and getting some thumbs up. Okay, perfect. Okay, let's move on. Let's talk about Gen X. So Generation X, their sort of stereotypes are that they really want work-life balance, that they are independent and self-reliant, and that they're very entrepreneurial. These are the stereotypes. The idea behind the work-life balance, and perhaps the reason Gen X's think that way, is they really watched their parents work hard, hard, hard. I know my dad, for example, was almost never home. He owned his own law practice. And I think we had family dinner maybe once a month, because he just was working at all hours, and he'd have court at 8 in the morning. And so he'd be, out of the house before I was even up a lot of times to get to court, and then he was working really late, and then he'd do it all over the next day. So people in my generation seem to have said, I don't want to have a life like that. And interestingly enough, I myself have said that out loud many times. When I leave here, I'm turning it off. And sometimes I do work after my daughter goes to bed, but I definitely make a point of having evening time with my family. So if we think about why these behavioral differences exist, for mid-careerists, Brad Karsh's way of talking about Gen X's, the focus for people who are Gen X, when they were kids, the focus was outside of the house. So if you're a mid-careerist or Gen X, whichever phrase you want to use, you probably grew up with parents who were both working. They were both working long hours. There were the 60s happening in our parents' lifetime where they were out there protesting. Women's lib was a big thing. So the shift was no longer in the home. It was about changing the world, making the world a better place, protesting things that people were unhappy about. And so the focus really became about kind of the larger community rather than inside the house. So mid-careerists were often left on their own. I know, for using myself as an example, we had a big field at the end of our street that was undeveloped. And my parents would, go outside and ride your bikes, and my sister and I knew that field, like the back of my hand. We would wander across the field into totally new neighborhoods. And then they started building houses in that field. And of course, my sister and I spent many Saturdays playing in the construction stuff, climbing tractors and probably doing some pretty dangerous things. But my mom never asked what we were up to for that whole Saturday that we were gone, so she didn't know that that's what we were doing. Does this sound familiar to you, my mid-careerists / Gen Xers? Is this resonating with you? I'm getting some yeses. I got a, oh yeah. I got a capital yes, capital Y-E-S. Perfect. Okay, let's talk about millennials. So millennials, their stereotypes are that they want meaningful work, they want regular feedback, and that they're really interested in growing as people and that they really want an experience. And if we think through some of these stereotypes, they live in the world of the internet. And so they see the world's problems and have been able to see the world's problems beyond what the news presents. Gen X's, we grew up watching the news, and so we only knew what was presented to us. Millennials, they grew up with the internet, so they had the ability to see what's happening in the world around them and research things in a way that we had never been able to research before. And so they, of course, want meaningful work. They want to participate in making the world better because they have access to the entire world. I have one woman put feedback with 3 exclamation points. My account manager, Rebecca, would agree with you. She also loves her feedback. So, the millennials grew up in a different world than we did. And let's talk through that a bit. But before we do that, unfortunately, millennials also get some negative stereotypes. Notice I didn't have negative stereotypes for the other generations. Millennials get a bad rap for being impatient, self-important, disloyal, and too emotional. So let's think about that for a second. Why would they be impatient? Well, they grew up with the internet, and so they had, access. They had immediate access. And in fact, I have read research myself that when we have to wait for something to download, our heart starts beating faster. So we all, no matter our age, literally have a little panic attack while we're waiting for things to download. So we're all impatient because of the internet, but millennials grew up with that. So it's not that they're impatient, it's just that they expect immediacy because of the world they grew up in. Self-importance. Well, I don't know about, it sounds negative if you say it that way, but also consider that millennials grew up with social media much earlier on in their formative years than the rest of us. So of course, if you type in that you're at the grocery store and people like it, that makes us all feel self-important, not just millennials. So we got to cut them a little bit of slack. Rebecca found this when she was researching for this presentation, that if you just type in millennials are, this is what you get. And so you can see that people really don't like millennials, it seems. Someone put, curious that you don't mention what baby boomers and Gen Xers are called behind their backs. Boomers might be considered fearful of change, and that this is how we've always done it. What about Gen X? I agree with you, and that's why I pointed that out. I did not mention those negative stereotypes because they don't seem to be so pervasive as the way millennials are talked about, at least in my own experience. So for example, when I go to HR conferences, there are a ton of speakers on talking about millennials and how to engage millennials, and you just see a lot of negativity around millennials online. But you're not the first person to mention that to me. I had an email a couple weeks ago from someone who got the invite for this webinar and said to me, nobody ever talks about boomers and how to engage boomers and how to treat boomers. Why do millennials get all of the attention? And she had a good point. So I told her I've got a blog post coming. So stay tuned, and I'll be sure to address that. Someone put, what do millennials say behind our backs? We'll put that in a blog post. Stay tuned, because I do intend to research kind of the boomer side of the whole thing. So I appreciate your comments. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about what drives millennials, as we did with the previous generations. So one thing that's happened, of course, over the years is that there's more money available. And so again, we have things like IKEA and Walmart and Target, where our purchases are much less important. These days, you walk through Target and it's like, oh, that's 10 bucks, I'll just buy it. Oh, that's 5 bucks, I'll just buy it. We have Amazon Prime, oh, that's just 3 bucks, I'll buy it. Versus, baby boomers, they grew up with parents who did not spend money that way. So the way that we view money is very different, and that makes for millennials who, of course, feel important. They had things like baby warmer wipes, or what is it, wipe warmers for when their parents were wiping their bottoms when they were in diapers. We didn't have that before until recently. So 20-somethings is the phrase that Brad Karsh was using when talking about millennials, and so I like that better than millennials. Maybe it's just a little bit less. Millennials has a bad rap now, that word. So 20-somethings grew up with an average of 2 kids instead of 4. And although we still have 2 working parents, it's much more acceptable these days to have 2 working parents, and it's easier to have a work-life balance. So previously, 2 working parents was either sort of looked down upon, and then there wasn't the kind of time available to do it. So if you had 2 working parents, for example, as a Gen X, you just didn't really ever see your parents. But because of the internet and technology, and cars drive faster and everything is faster, you can have 2 working parents and still have a good work-life balance. The focus can still be in the house despite the 2 working parents. What this means too, though, is that because we had all this money now, and we spend money very differently, and we just sort of throw our money away with our purchases, it's a lot easier these days with the way money works to put your kid in all sorts of classes. They may have piano class and a hockey class and soccer class and dance class. And so they grew up with all of these classes that they were attending. Their lives are very structured. They have play dates now. So as a Gen Xer, my mom kicked me out of the house on Saturday and told me not to come back until dawn. I did not have a very structured summer vacation. Versus millennials or 20-somethings, they grew up with play dates, very structured sort of time to hang out. And also college is very syllabus driven. So as a former college teacher, I can tell you that not only did I have to create a syllabus for my millennial students, but I also had to give them a little chart that laid out exactly how to get an A, exactly how to give a B, exactly how to get a C. And so they just grew up with just a ton of structure. And so that's where that desire for immediate feedback comes from. They just have always had it. So those are some things to think about. One other differentiator, and then we'll move into talking about transcending engagement for all of these. Think about icons too. So those of us prior to millennials, we all had icons that were older white men, and what that signifies is if you work hard your whole life, you too could have money like these older white men. But these days, who are our icons? Mark Zuckerberg, who was a bazillionaire, what, by the time he was 25. We have Justin Bieber, who was famous by the time he was 13, all for posting a YouTube video. If you're on YouTube, you can see just regular old people have a ton of followers. So people have the ability to make themselves famous easily, and we'd never had that before. So it's just differences in the world that we've lived in, and that's really what drives our behavior. So millennials, curious if this is all resonating with you. Feeling good, feeling good. Someone put, sounds like me. Perfect. I got a couple other yeses. I got a yes exclamation. Awesome. Okay, so something to think about, 75% of the workforce will be millennials in 2025. So those people out there who are putting millennials down have to get with it, because they're of course not going away. Okay, so let's talk about engagement for all generations, which is why you were all here. I want to preface this by saying every generation, every human being on the planet, according to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we all have certain basic needs. We all have physiological needs. We all have safety needs. So we all have the need to sleep and breathe and eat. We all have the need to feel safe in our environment. And once those two needs are met, then we have the need to feel like we belong. We have the need to feel loved. And once our love and belonging need is met, then we seek self-esteem. And so according to Maslow, what he's saying is you cannot have a healthy amount of self-esteem unless you feel like you belong to someone. And it doesn't have to be, you have to be famous, you just have to feel like somebody out there loves you. And so once you have self-esteem, then you can self-actualize, which means ultimately be the best that you can be. And so interestingly enough, if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you can see where engagement fits right in there. According to my research that I had done with this client, and also according to William Kahn, who was defining engagement, what we were both saying was that people have to feel like they belong, they have to have self-esteem, which would come through achieving goals, and ultimately be inspired to be the best that they can be. So Maslow was onto something. I'll also share the platinum rule with you. You may have seen this before. So the golden rule is treat others the way that you would want to be treated, or do unto others as you would do to yourself. But the platinum rule is treat others the way that they want to be treated. So in the end, what I'm saying is we're all individuals, right? And maybe some millennials don't want instant feedback, meanwhile others do. As a Gen Xer, I'd like some feedback. I would like people to tell me they're doing well. In fact, when I do training programs, once I get those little evaluations back, I immediately drool all over them and read them word for word, because I want to know what people said. So, you know, it varies. So although we kind of have these stereotypes and we can sort of group people by age because of their different events that happened in their formative years, in the end, we all have to treat each other the way that each other wants to be treated. We're all individuals. So in terms of basic human needs, all generations want to feel valued. We all want to feel valued for our contributions. We all want to feel valued for our ideas. We all want to feel valued that we, you know, are participating in mission critical tasks. Can everybody agree with me? Do we all want this? Can I get a hooray if these are some of the things that you want? I'm getting some hoorays. I got a hoorah. Someone must be from the Marines. I got a absolutely, a right on. Okay, perfect. So we all want these things. So let's try to give them to all generations, right? Let me give you an example of what feeling valued looks like. So I did some training for a company that does vector control, which means they kill mosquitoes. And at this company, I was giving the training. On the break, I asked, hey, tell me more about what you guys do. So I was just kind of chatting with a woman, and I said, tell me what you guys do. I know you kill mosquitoes, but wanted to hear a little bit more. And she says, nope, that's about it. We kill mosquitoes. You got it. And this guy standing next to her says, are you kidding me? Is that all you think we do here? We are saving this community from West Nile virus. Who's more engaged? The woman or the guy who says we're saving the community from West Nile virus? So the whole reason vector control exists is to kill mosquitoes. Why do they have to kill mosquitoes? Because they spread diseases like West Nile virus. So this is a fantastic story, and I've told that story so many times because it's such a great example of what happens when somebody's inspired. So if you think about this pond, the guy who thinks he's saving the community from West Nile virus, he's going to give maximum effort while he sprays the pond. He's going to cover that pond 100% because he is saving the community from West Nile virus. If it's the woman out there spraying this pond, she's probably just going to kind of give it a once over and go back to her truck and on to the next pond, right? So that's where maximum discretionary effort is important, and that's where inspiring people and helping them understand how they're valued matters. If his goal is to kill mosquito eggs with this, he needs to cover the entire pond, but the woman probably won't. So, think about how that might affect your own business. Put that pond into the context of your own business. So how do you build engagement in this category of helping people feel valued? Well, I encourage you to talk with your managers about linking tasks to the organization's mission. So if you give an employee some sort of report that they have to do, I encourage you to talk about how that report is important to the organization's mission. If you have a file clerk filing files in the back and you feel like they only make minimum wage, they're not really important, they're not going to file correctly. Why do you even have them there if it doesn't matter if they file correctly or not? So talk to them about why being organized is so important to your customer service, right? So help people understand how their tasks, how does spraying that pond link to saving the community from West Nile virus? Some other very simple ways to help people feel valued are to listen to their ideas and implement their ideas so they feel valued when they share their ideas, and reward and acknowledge people for the things that they do. It's easy, cost effective, free even. So something else we all want is to enjoy our work. Nobody wants to go to work and be a button pusher. We all want to understand how our work matters, but we also want to be autonomous. We want to feel like we have some flexibility. And of course, we want to be satisfied. So no matter the generation, we all want to enjoy our work. So offer some levels of flexibility. Consider, for example, do people really have to be in the office every single day? If it's going to help people be more engaged, if they can, telecommute once a week, then let them do that. That's how you're going to drive engagement. Provide work that feels challenging. So if you have, using that file clerk as an example, probably not very challenging work. Are there other things that file clerk can do that will help engage them so that their mind doesn't go numb while they're back there filing? Figure out what your employees want. Help them achieve their goals. How do they? What are their goals? What are their aspirations? Help them achieve those goals. All right, we all want to like and trust our team. Can I get a hooray? Do you all want to like and trust your team despite your generation? So we all want to feel like we have good teamwork, like we're getting good feedback from, I got a hooray with a bunch of Y's at the end. I love it. Love it. Okay, so we all want to have teamwork. We all want feedback from our team. Again, it doesn't matter your generation, whether you're a millennial or not, you want feedback. You all want to feel like you're communicating in the right ways, and you all want to feel like your decisions, the decisions that your group is making, are good decisions. And so some ways to give this to your workforce, some ways to build engagement that transcends generations, is to be transparent. If you're a leader in your organization or you're in human resources, be transparent with your employees about why you do the things that you do. Encourage everybody to be transparent with each other about why they do the things that they do. Create a civil work environment. So this one always kills me. As an expert in workplace bullying, I get people who call me and say, we've got some workplace bullying issues, can you help us? And then during the discovery, I learned that they've also got some engagement initiatives happening, and they do an engagement survey every year. Meanwhile, they have workplace bullying. So those two things don't work well together. So if you're focused on building employee engagement, that means you have to be focused on creating a civil work environment. Help people learn how to give good feedback. So I always recommend do a company-wide training on delivering feedback. Do a company-wide training so that everybody is able to give constructive feedback and so that everybody is able to receive constructive feedback. And then managers need additional training on how to deliver that feedback through the performance conversation. So giving people the ability and the empowerment to develop activities that allow them to trust their team members. One example of decision-making discrepancy is Southwest Airlines. If you've flown Southwest several times, then you may have noticed that every time you fly, their safety announcement is different. Some of them do it really funny. If you go on YouTube, there's plenty of people who have posted Southwest attendants, giving their speech and dancing and doing all kinds of fun, crazy things. So Southwest is giving decision-making discrepancy. They're saying you have to do this safety message. It's an FAA regulation, but do it however you want in a way that suits your personality. So can you find easy ways for your employees to have some ability in decision-making that's not squashing them? Something else we all want is to like our environment. We all want to have a good culture. We all want to have a work that sort of matches our pace. We all want to have pride in the company we work for, and we all want to have a nice workspace. So what can you do in this space? Well, you could try redecorating. Now, I'm not suggesting you get a budget to tear down walls. I am suggesting that you can go to Home Depot and buy a can of paint and paint a wall bright orange so that people feel engaged when they walk in the room. Taupe is not engaging. So if you walk into your office and it's beat up and the walls are old and taupe and not engaging, then people aren't going to be engaged. So you don't have to have Google, you don't have to have a ping pong table and a swing set, but you do have to create an environment that feels exciting if you want people to be energized and inspired. Provide opportunities for people to be social. So what's happened with the internet is that we are all very social. We all want to connect, right? So create opportunities for people to connect in person. People are going to come up with great ideas while they're sitting on a couch, interacting, having a cup of coffee. So your meetings don't always have to be in a conference room where everybody's stiff, with the gray walls around you. Talk about your values often. Find out what people want. How do they want the environment to look, and give it to them. Lastly, we all want to believe in leadership. We all want to trust our leaders. We all want to believe that our leaders have our interests at heart. We all want to believe that our leaders are making good decisions. And we all want to believe that leaders are providing the resources that we need. So again, despite your generation, every single one of us, we all want to believe in our leadership. We all want to believe that they're working, with our interests in heart. Let me share a story with you. So a friend of mine got a new job. This happened a few years ago, but it's a great story. He got a job a few years ago, and so I was chatting with him about his new job and asking him how it was going. And earlier that week, that before our conversation, he had gotten an email. The HR manager had sent an email out that they were going to start doing Bagel Mondays. So, I'm asking him how's work going, and he kind of threw that in there. Oh, I'm really liking it. They're going to start doing Bagel Mondays. That's kind of cool. It seems like one of those places where we're going to get some of these little perks. It'll be cool. So he was pretty excited about his job, and Bagel Mondays was part of that excitement. Well, Monday rolls around and apparently there were no bagels. So the next time I see my friend, I'm asking him, hey, how's your new job? And he was going on and on about the bagels. And he's telling me, you know what? Remember I told you about Bagel Mondays? We're not doing that. And it was so weird because we all get to work and there's no bagels and nobody mentioned it. And so we're all at work starving, and we had to wait till lunch before we could eat. Nobody had eaten breakfast because we thought there were going to be bagels. And so the reason I bring this story up is you don't have to buy bagels to provide employee engagement. But when I saw how annoyed he was by the fact that he had been promised a bagel and then it never came through, it was a good kind of slap in the face story about how important it is to do what you say you're going to do, and to help employees believe in you by engaging in the right kinds of actions. And so I just kind of think, with the amount of disengagement that this bagel incident caused, what kind of disengagement do you get when something that matters happens? Because in the end, who cares? It's just a bagel. But everybody was annoyed by it. And so that whole morning was wasted. And it sort of kicked off a chain of events of like, well, maybe I can't trust my leaders, all over bagels. So again, if something as little as a bagel can do that, what do the big things do when leaders aren't following through on what they say? So what I recommend is finding some ways to do some mentor protege programs. So if you can get some proteges to hook up with some leaders, it will allow those proteges to get to know the leaders and trust the leaders. And then they become sort of champions for the leadership team. And so then you've got people out there in the workforce sort of talking about their relationship with the leaders. Have leaders blog about internal issues so that they're being transparent. Leadership should be in your onboarding so that when new hires come in, they get a chance to really sit down with leaders and get to know them so they can build that trust. And also ensure people have what they need. So I have another example. I have another friend who had sales quota that he was given, and was told, he's a director of sales, and he was told, you're going to have, this is your quota, you're going to have this number of employees and some managers who are going to manage these employees. Well, he was never given these resources, but he was held to the same quota. And so, of course, that was very frustrating and drove a lot of disengagement for him as well, to be told, here's your quota, but we're not going to give you the resources we promised. So where do you start with all of this? You might be thinking, well, where do I start? Those were some nice tips, Catherine, but I'm not really sure what the heck you want me to do with those tips. Well, I would put it back on you. Why did you show up here? And, I asked you that earlier. You all said that you were looking for some ideas to build employee engagement that transcended the generations in your workforce. And I just gave you several. Most of the ideas cost no money. It's all about how you build relationships and how you behave. Now, beyond that, I hate to be so theoretical, and I like to give tangible information. So what I'm going to say here is that you could do this the hard way. You could build employee engagement the hard way, or you could build it the easy way. And so I wanted to introduce you to Engagement in a Box. Engagement in a Box is a digital toolbox filled with over 50 downloadable checklists, forms and articles, scripts, all kinds of good stuff. All of these things are meant to enable you to easily begin building a culture of engagement. Well, what's in Engagement in a Box? I shall tell you. You will get, for example, a ready-to-go employee engagement survey. It has 17 questions. It's the same survey I used for that client where I was telling you that we came to efficacy, fit, and inspiration. It's that same survey. So if I might say so myself, it's better than Gallup's survey, which apparently is measuring what was it Gallup measuring? commitment and enthusiasm. You'll also get a strategic plan template so that you can start to build your engagement plans. I've actually put 3 sets of training slides in there for you, so you can do a little mini training for your leaders and managers on what employee engagement is. It'll help you through that process of kind of saying, hey, leaders and managers, how are we going to define engagement here in our workplace before we start implementing initiatives? And you've got some job aids, some onboarding checklists, and scripts for your performance conversations, all kinds of good stuff. So what I've done here is I've taken regular old HR things that all HR people are doing, for example, performance management, and I've given you some new forms and scripts and things to use for your performance management system. So my forms are building engagement through the process. So you're not going to have to do anything new necessarily. You're going to do the things you're already doing. You're just going to do it with engagement in there as part of the lens or the context that you're doing this through. Just to take a look at what you get, this is what it looks like inside the box. There's a little introductory video for you that will kind of walk you through it, but that's the only video in there really. It really is a bunch of forms and checklists and scripts. So it's not a class that you have to go through to get some sort of certification and engagement. It's just a box of resources for you, and it's meant to help you build your engagement initiatives. So normally this is $147, but because you love engagement, and I'm assuming you do because you're here, I want to give it to you for $97. So again, normally it's $147, but because you love engagement as much as I do, and you might tell that I'm passionate, I'm actually standing up right now over my desk as I talk about this stuff because I love it so much. So use the code GENWEB and you can get it for $97. So all you have to do is go to civilitypartners.com/engagement in a box. And then as you're buying it, type in GenWeb there for your promo code and you'll be able to get it for $97. Do I have any questions about anything we've talked about today, or comments or questions about engagement in a box? How can I help? What do you need from me? Any questions at all? Ooh, I wish I could show you this screen right here. Someone put, we bought this and it's really awesome, inspiring lots of fun ideas as we are designing a new orientation plan. Oh, Desiree, can I use that on my website? Thank you so much. I love that comment. I'll read it again. We bought this and it's really awesome, inspiring lots of fun ideas as we're designing a new orientation plan. Thanks again, Desiree. I really appreciate that feedback. She says, yes, I can use it. Someone put, what a great idea. Thank you. Awesome. Any other questions? Let's see. Somebody put, do you have any recommendations for other resources? You know what? I'll just say engagement in a box is cheap. It's meant to be sort of easy to use. Desiree says she's having a lot of fun using it. I personally provide a ton of resources in my e-newsletter. If you want to sign up, you can just go to info@civilitypartners.com or shoot an email there and we'll sign you up if you want more resources from me. I do a ton of free resources, checklists, all kinds of stuff. My husband says I give too much away. Or you could go to civilitypartners.com, our website, and sign up there. And if you have any other things that you need, you know, I always try to provide information to help. Again, I'm very passionate about creating a positive work environment. And so I will try to give you whatever I can to help you be successful in that. Someone says, can I quote you on the mosquito story? It was a perfect example. Yes, absolutely, you can quote me. I've told that story so many times, but it is a great story, isn't it? That's why I use it all the time. All right, any other questions, comments, thoughts, things I can do for you? Let's see, someone says, is there a complete culture in a box pack as well? Ooh, that's a great question. I do have something called the Workplace Culture Makeover Masterclass, which is culture in a box, essentially. That is a class that you go through. It's got several videos, other documents and things that you'll need. Some of it is crossed over. Some of what's in Engagement in a Box is in the masterclass, but the masterclass is quite a bit more more and is really about building a positive culture. So if you're interested in that, shoot us an email at info@civilitypartners, and I will send you the link, and you can take a look at that, the Workplace Culture Makeover Masterclass. All right, thank you so much, all. I appreciated your participation. I've got a comment. You were great. Thank you. Well, thank you for being here. I appreciate that. You all have a great rest of your day, and I shall see you in Engagement in a Box.